Hello. This is Texte zum Nachdenken, number 13. Texte zum Nachdenken is a kind of reading format in the, let's say, gray zone between literature, art writing, or writing as an artistic practice. This time, first time abroad, premiere, it's very cool. And we have 4 readings altogether by Miriam Stoney, Jasper List Thompson, Ariane Koch, who's a writer, she's not here, but she will be read by Rafaely and Nicolay, and I will also contribute. I am Benedict Bock, and I organize Texte zum Nachdenken. Texte zum Nachdenken, I said what it is. It's also a platform, so all the readings are online. Textezumnachdenken.com. I guess it translates maybe texts for reflection. It's very generic in German, at least. This I wanted to say. On the website, there's still something online which we will take down on Sunday. So we started a new program with text-based film works. And there's 2 works online right now. One is by Park MacArthur and Konstantina Tsavitsanos, and the other is by Lucas Odahara. So if you're interested, go check it out before Sunday. Let's get started. The first reading. So Rafaely, who is here, some of you know her. She is an actor, and she will read a translation of a German novel. It's not out yet, or like written German language. Novel in German language by a Swiss writer, Ariane Koch. The novel is called Die Aufdrängung, Overstaying in English, and it's coming out at Pushkin Press very soon. Are you ready? We do it? Let's go.
May I move this?
Yes. Yes, you
It's toasty. Getting there. So I'll just be reading some excerpts from Overstaying.
Lights on?
No, it's good. Thank you. In the place where the visitor came from, he no longer is. In the place where he was, there is now only a non-him. In the place where the visitor no longer is, someone is dealing with a gap, an empty space, possibly pulsating empty space. Someone finds him or herself confronted with the visitor's absence. Someone is possibly baffled, possibly sad, possibly happy about it. Everything the visitor might be too much of here, he is perhaps too little of somewhere else. Here there was nothing missing. Here no one was waiting for a visitor. Here there is already everything to excess. Only the roundel bar is gradually falling apart. The golden kerchiefs tacked to the walls are increasingly coming loose. The people drinking along the ring of the bar, too, are getting wrinkles. First in the corners of their eyes, then in the corners of their mouths. Sooner or later, their jowls will be hanging down into their beer foam. The roundel bar is turning more and more into a museum housing fossils. Sometimes I imagine wall text, glass cases, basins to put the fossils into, the artist with the walrus mustache, a woman with very long hair and a busy-looking face who likes to wear a dress that looks like fish scales, another woman with shorter hair, whose drink sometimes slips spectacularly out of her hands. Yes, these fossils need a home too. The fact is, all my life I've longed to go away, but then I've never left. The fact is, I've been thinking about leaving and talking about leaving my whole life. But I'm still here. I am the oldest fossil of all, and I hate this small town so much that I will have my revenge on it by never actually leaving, even if I constantly act like I'm about to. I am the oldest fossil of all, and even if someone asked me on bended knee to leave here, I would stay anyway. Maybe the only one who has understood the difference between possibilities and actualities is the visitor. Maybe he never actually wanted to go anywhere at all. Maybe he just wanted to stay where he was all his life, but he has nevertheless managed to privilege the unavoidable over the unwanted. I thought I should tell the visitor that he should be proud of himself for having understood something that a small town full of fossils is never, not for one single second, capable of understanding. Not even when the rooms are percolating and dripping onto their skulls. I thought I might tell the visitor about my possible departure so that he could prognosticate its feasibility. Or maybe I hoped that if I got closer to the visitor, a little of his having left would spill over onto me and flush me out of the city like a giant wave. In short, I needed an expert. Sometimes I think I shouldn't talk about leaving anymore because I've already talked about it too much. Not a day goes by that I don't talk about leaving. I never get tired of talking about it. I wonder if it's only possible to stay somewhere if you constantly talk about leaving, since someone who only talks about staying has really, on the inside, long since left already, right? There are 2 lions on guard at the front of my house, both with jaws wide open, each resting a paw on a respective sphere. Yet they did not scare off the visitor. I said to him, "You're welcome to stay with me, but you'll have to bring your own mattress, unless you want to sleep on an air mattress that the air is gradually leaking out of so that you're actually sleeping on the floor, but not directly on the floor, since I own a Persian carpet that someone forgot and left here. But I don't mind if you use it, that is, lie on it when you're in the mood for a sore neck." And so the visitor carried a mattress with a salmon-colored slip cover through the small town. I presume the lady in the light grey overcoat loaned it to him. Now and then he put the mattress down on a park bench, took a short break, and stared up once again at the mountain, which peered back down, impassive as always, just like the passers-by. I hadn't been polite enough to help him carry his luggage. He managed it, but only puffing heavily in a slightly bent posture, tipping either to the left or the right. He made it up the stairs, step by step, scraping the walls of the hall, and finally moved into the room, which was square and stuffed with broken vacuum cleaners. The visitor put the mattress between the flapping vacuum cleaner nozzles that would quietly nuzzle up to him at night, something he did not yet expect. I took in the visitor because I live in a house with 10 rooms, and reside in only 9 of them, which is to say I had an empty room. As a result, I always used to get phone calls from interested parties, even though I had never advertised the room publicly. At some point, I simply stopped answering the phone. The room got dusty, and I thought I should repurpose it. House pets could live there, or nomads even. One time, I even considered a butler. The room used to belong to someone who was permanently traveling, which I found convenient. At first, they would regularly send me photos and postcards. Later, I never heard from them again. The person's name is still affixed to the mailbox, but by now it's been bleached by the sun, blurred by the rain, and made illegible. My name, in contrast, remains wonderfully legible. I never actually knew what kind of name it is that I was bequeathed. I never bothered to look it up, this name I was condemned to bear. Every now and then I run across namesakes in books. For instance, a misogynist judge from around the turn of the century, an insane biologist specializing in parasites, or a company whose mission it is to manufacture weapons and send them out into the world. The visitor has a name too, of course. A really long one, in fact. But it's so long that one simply cannot remember it, no matter how hard one tries. My reputation seems to have improved since the visitor has been occupying my house and my time. For example, there are neighbor children who never even used to glance at me, who now constantly kick soccer balls into my yard, supposedly by accident, so that they can knock on my front door and gawk at the visitor. Every time this happens, the visitor jumps up to offer them candy, and I don't prevent him. It's all the same to me whether or not he's planning to poison the neighbor children. They're all right if small, but then again, they're not that small, and then I think about it, they have chubby thighs. The neighbor children suck on their exotic candies, still gawking, but they don't move from the front door. I contemplate availing myself of the broom, or the herd of spooky vacuum cleaner nozzles. The visitor beats me to it, though, by laughing and trying to hold the children's hands, at which they run back outside, shrieking. My reputation seems to have risen so high that the head of tourism for the small town has a personal letter sent to me, sincerely thanking me for my efforts. He writes that helping out one's fellow man is by no means something we can take for granted. There are plenty of single women squatting in gigantic, crumbling houses, just waiting for death to come, although it often takes its time, and so the corridors of these houses grow dusty, each one painted its own specifically intuited color. Look out! There are so-called con men roaming the streets of the cities, ringing doorbells and talking to the poor women and men living in those houses into buying nonsensical color combinations. And in those very motley colored but unused corridors, there are full-fledged dust balls lying around, so these cold-hearted women buy vacuum cleaner after vacuum cleaner, every last one of which collapses in the face of the immensity of these lumps of dust, so that whole collections of broken vacuum cleaners are left standing around in these people's houses, useless. We can only assume that these vacuum cleaner armies are increasingly deploying, yes, or in any case are increasingly up to some nefarious scheme. There's no way to be exactly sure of what. At all events, he is extraordinarily pleased that I'm making a significant contribution to the struggle against the out-of-control vacuum population, exposing by billeting unhoused individuals with me. The community of those allergic to dust thanks me as well. Occasionally, when I find myself in the darkness of the bottomless pits of the world, I call up one or another of my friends and acquaintances to inform them how it's going for a member of a discriminated minority. And when I pull off an especially good description, I receive in return deep admiration for my social and humanistic engagement, which I accept with pretend modesty and a fake cough. It is of the utmost importance that a visitor feel comfortable, I then say. That he feel taken in hand, carried, and floating along. Therefore, it is never at any point appropriate to complain about the visitor's proclivities or seem to question his particular ways. No, it is all the more urgent to welcome and incorporate them affirmingly into one's daily routine, I pontificate into the telephone. Meanwhile, I think to myself, I will only very, very rarely let the visitor interact with other people. He should be my scientific experiment, mine alone. I need only feed him enough and make sure he knows that I am the mistress of this house. It's not even like he'd notice his scarf hanging out at the bottom of his jacket and back like a tail dragging along the floor. The visitor is all alone with me, I think, before I drop into bed at night. I suspect that the visitor is coloring every one of his eyelashes in its original color. He paints skin on his body so that it looks like skin. He makes little dots for freckles where he has freckles already. He washes his hair so that later he can get them greasy again. Paints his lips with lip-colored lipstick. Every time the visitor is in the bathroom, he spends hours in there just to look exactly the same afterwards as he did before. When he heads for the sofa, he dangles his arms, starting a good 10 feet before he gets there, and then drops into the cushions. He lies flat on the Freudian couch, cheek lobes hanging to one side, arms seeming dead. There are people who always seem to belong exactly where they happen to find themselves, even though they've only just then arrived there. There are people who never seem to not actually belong wherever they are, and or seem to belong everywhere. I wonder if it's in the realm of possibility for someone to fuse with or melt into a sofa until it became impossible to tell whether someone was visitor or sofa. I imagine that it would be painful for the visitor if I now dropped onto the sofa myself. Aside from that, I wonder how long he intends to take a break and or when he's going to get up and finally get back to peeling the parsnips. Upon closer examination, incidentally, it is unclear whether the visitor's clothes are extremely vulgar. The crossing diagonal laces winding around his thighs, for instance, as if he were some kind of Cleopatra. I say to the visitor on the sofa, "Those aren't pants, those are pajamas." Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm all that interested in the visitor. In no shape or form do I wonder what he's up to in his guest chamber, what fills his plastic bags to overflowing, why he spends hours on end screaming into the telephone. I'm not aggrieved in the least when he decides to go off somewhere and hide and refuses me his presence. His finally taking off his Cleopatra laces or forgoing his hair twirling is incapable of disappointing me. If anything, I rejoice, for what could be better than for the visitor's idiosyncrasies to take place behind closed doors where they're no longer capable of driving me insane. Now the phone's ringing too. It is advisable never to answer it, because you never know if it might be an unresolvable family conflict. You never know if it's my siblings who call only when they want something I don't want to give them. You never know if it's my siblings calling to tell me that I need to take my crates and hit the road. My siblings have multiplied, had children, given expression to their own being in the world. Their reproductions in the form of children stand behind them like shadows and watch their backs. If my siblings used to be question marks, their children are exclamation points. My siblings no longer moving through the world respectively alone, but rather doubled and tripled, might be calling to say that their manifold existence now requires a many-roomed home, which, coincidentally, I, as a single individual, currently possess. They might be calling to inform me that while they are grateful that someone has periodically swept up the stones that have come loose from the facade, they now have sufficient hands at their disposal to do so. Indeed, more hands at their disposal than I had at mine. Maybe I should answer the phone and tell my siblings that I, too, have multiplied, and or taken in a needy visitor who more than fills up the emptiness allegedly reigning in this house. Maybe I should tell them that it's just not right to kick a poor visitor out onto the street, one who cannot master our language, both the actual one and the cultural one, and who thus depends on my urgent help, i.e. shelter. Maybe I should tell them that they're monsters who should be ashamed of themselves for claiming so openly the luxurious and inappropriate desires brought about by their self-duplication via children, I think, stretched out contentedly on the sofa. When it gets light, the visitor slinks into my room to see if there might be any space next to my sleeping form, then lies down right outside the door, dozing like a cat, ears pricked up and turning this way and that towards every compass point in turn. When I come out of the room in my granny nightgown, he opens his eyes at once and laughs as though there were as though there were anything to laugh at it. He has kept his shoes on while he slept. It surpasses my understanding why the visitor is unable to keep the herd of vacuum cleaner nozzles in his room in check. Before the visitor's presence inaugurated the dawn of a new era, I entered that room countless times and always emerged fully unscathed. I admit that I did sometimes avail myself of a broom to keep the vacuum cleaner nozzles at bay and or tame them by giving a nozzle a bunk on the muzzle. And of course, I always made especially sure to have some lump of dirt or another ready for the vacuum cleaner nozzles, so as not to fall out of their good graces. I told my visitor from the beginning that he had to share the room with them, that I saw no possibility of resettling the vacuum cleaner nozzles, for in the end they seemed somehow particularly content there. On the complete contrary, I even have the feeling that the vacuum cleaner nozzle herd is doing better since the visitor laid his mattress among them. It may well be that the visitor is only putting forth the vacuum cleaner nozzles as an excuse for his messy, disheveled hair. The visitor lets his hairs grow unchecked instead of pomading them properly. I have tried to make it clear to him that there is a brush store in the town to which he might kindly pay a visit. I even offered him to advance the money for a hairbrush, so disturbing did I find his coiffure. Well, if the visitor is going to act deaf towards my suggestions, he will have to be satisfied with the vacuum cleaner nozzle herd and or its hairdressing expertise, which, with all due respect, seems to be not the greatest. In general, the vacuum cleaner nozzles prefer vacuuming on skin, where they leave behind dark patches. I have informed the visitor that this will be beneficial to the circulation and his health in general. Today I am going to start drawing up a set of rules and regulations that will encompass, if possible, every point the visitor is expected to comply with. It'll be of service to everybody. The set of rules can be extended at will. I imagine it as a kind of holy scripture that the visitor can keep next to his bed. If and when he has questions, for I believe he has many, he can look up the answers to them in the rulebook instead of bothering me while I'm working. Unlike the Bible, it will not be a collective scripture, but one composed by me alone. I'm sick and tired of composing collective scriptures. Admittedly, I have never taken part in composing a collective scripture, but I imagine it would be tedious for me if anyone else tried to contribute his or her opinion. It's important to me that the visitor understands that going around in his underwear here is by no matter of course. Incidentally, there was a lot of work I should have been doing, but I'm prepared to let everything be and or drop for the sake of this visitor, and instruct him instead. In fact, I buy him a decent pair of pants in the supermarket. When I buy him a pair of slippers, a couple of books, I think I might even cut his toenails while he's asleep, the way my parents used to do for me when I had yet again refused to cut my nails and was walking around with claws. It's cramped in the bathtub, especially when two people are lying in there. The only real possibilities are for one person to lie in and or on the other, or for both to sit with their legs tucked in like little parcels. If they go for the parcel option, the parts of their bodies that are out of the water will quickly get chilly, in fact catch cold, looming up the surface like pointy icebergs. It is therefore necessary to coat oneself qua parcel in hot water, placing each side of the body in the water for 1 or 2 minutes. In so doing, it is important to make sure that one nostril remains located above water at all times. The gargling underwater nostril, meanwhile, contributes to one's auditory well-being. These techniques can also be applied to lying on a sofa. If everyone involved leans their back against an armrest and places their legs on the sofa, they can meet in the middle of the sofa. Depending on the length or shortness of the piece of furniture in question, partial overlapping might occur. Should the overlapping of legs be in fact desired, said legs can be stacked above and below one another at will. Feet can be placed between the other person's legs or on their belly. Place one Scottish wool blanket on top of this leg salad. The only thing is, sometimes a bare leg will slip out from under the blanket towards the floor, but usually it will quickly be pulled back in. When the decision is made to lie on a sofa in a state of not merely overlapping but full-on covering, one hopes that the piece of furniture in question has at its disposal a sufficient total length in relation to the supine body length. The visitor's spine rasps against mine. When he lies down on the sofa, I lie down on the Persian carpet. When he comes to join me on the Persian carpet, I vault onto the sofa. I suspect it lies in the visitor's and my respective natures that we never end up encamping in the same place, only and precisely somewhere the other isn't. Really, I don't know what the deal is with this sofa. I cannot deny that I brought it into the house myself, even though I don't like sitting down somewhere and never have. But now this sofa just stands around, even though I have never intended to use it. It simulates living, residing, home, one might even say homeland, while in reality it just gets in the way and spoils any good mood I might otherwise be in. Moreover, the visitor lies around on it constantly as though that's what it's made for. Sofas are ugly, even assuming you're prepared to blow all your savings on one. Sofas are uncomfortable, especially when one has a visitor trying to rub his lovely feet against mine. Sofas turn travelers into sedentaries, extroverts into introverts, protesters into sleepers. Anyone who has a sofa has decided to settle down. That is, capitulate. Basically, to die soon. But I'm not ready to die. Not for the sofa, not for the visitor. Tomorrow I will order the visitor to get up from the sofa and carry it out onto the street to be taken away. I'm sure there are plenty of people with suicidal tendencies who would love to have it. Actually, I wanted to get rid of it, the vacuum cleaner collection. Actually, I thought that the time had come to part from the nozzles. In the end, they just get in the way, take up all the visitor's space, and wantonly snuffle at his bags. I had no way of knowing that the visitor would be capable of taming and training the vacuum cleaner nozzles lickety-split. Every so often, they perform for me one of the pieces they're rehearsing together. Like synchronized swimmers, they dance up and down, flap here and there, raise their trunks and trumpet out melodies. As I spectate, I droop with sadness. I can barely get up from the sofa. Applauding is a great strain. I wasn't planning on cheering anyway. The vacuum cleaners bow their nozzles politely. Outside, sunlight falls unexpectedly onto the trees, whose bare limbs reach out weakly towards it. Yes, practically cuddle up with the light. The mountain peak has impaled one single rain cloud, which now disgorges its contents into the mountain. Streams come down the slopes, pick up branches and medium-sized rocks here and there, and make of them a little heap at the foot of the mountain. Someone asked me something. The vacuum cleaner nozzles suction gently at my hands, asking for a little treat, but I can't manage to get up. Will I ever again?